go to the next section now, scaling Tableau. These are a bit shorter, by the way, than the first initial architecturing section, but are important as well, because remember, why is scaling Tableau important? Well, for two reasons. You want to get the sizing for your Tableau environment right to ensure performance, so that your embedded little charts loads really fast when a web page is being loaded from your application in the first place. So sizing for performance. And then the second aspect is availability, right? You want to design your Tableau environment and your cluster, which will come up in a moment, so that your analytics are always available, or at least that you can plan for the necessary downtime if that's applicable. The smart ones on the call, or well, maybe, I don't know what I'm saying, but some of you who will find that, or will already know that this only applies to Tableau Server itself, so not Tableau Online or Public, right? So remember, Tableau Server is a platform you manage yourself. Tableau Online and Public are cloud-hosted, Tableau-managed platforms that you don't get your hands on from a back-end perspective. And so you don't choose the scaling for Tableau Online. That's being done for you. Tableau works actively on ensuring that the resources are available for their Tableau Online clients, with the right, share of the pie being tied to every client, and the resource usage, and that's being monitored and analyzed and everything. But for Tableau Server, that's going to be your responsibility, and this is where that scaling comes into play. Now, scaling Tableau Server, I'm just going to list a few initial sizing guidelines, which are very, very useful to estimate what your Tableau Server size should be in the beginning. And those are the following. So the first rule, let's say, and it's not a hard rule, because depending on many circumstantial aspects, this can change. But the first rule is that one Tableau Server core, or one processor core for Tableau Server, can typically handle the workload of 6 to 8 concurrent explorers. Now, I think we should clarify every word in this sentence, though. So core refers to a processor core in this case, and the amount of Tableau Server processes and the resources from a Tableau perspective you're going to put on one server depends on the number of cores that you have. And you're going to want to determine the number of cores based on this, right? So how many processor cores is going to be the question that we answer. And to answer that, we know that we can take 6 to 8 concurrent explorers, or the workload that is the equivalent for that. So just to clarify further, we're saying explorers here. Explorers are 1 out of 3 types of licenses for Tableau Server. We have creators, which are your desktop users that build stuff, publish, create data sources, interact very, very heavily. We have explorers, which are kind of like, maybe super users that can open reports, can interact with them, and can even tweak them a little bit. And we have a third role that's viewer, and the viewer is kind of the main population. It's every consumer that just views and interacts with reports, and it's going to be the largest part of your deployment for sure. But this rule is based on explorers, and we can tweak it later on to account for people who have a more active role like a creator, or a less active role like a viewer. We'll do that in a moment. But so this 6 to 8 is for explorers. And then the fact that they're concurrent is also key, obviously. So concurrent means that they're active at the very same time. There's 20 people active at the very same time. That means 20 concurrent users that there are at that moment interacting with Tableau Server. It's a very difficult concept to define properly if you don't have data to back it up, because you could say, okay, well, maybe in this 1 minute time span, there's been activity from 5 people, so that's 5 concurrent users. But in the last half hour, which is a much larger time span, we've had activity from 100 people. So what does that mean? What's my concurrency? Is that 5 in that 1 minute, or is that 100 in a half hour? And so that's kind of a gray area that's going to differ. And ideally, you can already use data from your application to estimate that, but that's not always the case. Now, in this case, I think we're looking at a reasonable time span of 5 to 10 minutes of 6 to 8 people being active. This is just an interpretation, a personal interpretation I'm making. There's no written rule for that, and I don't know how Tableau calculates it themselves, but that's our impression from having estimated this many times and from finding how often Tableau Server resources are being released. So meaning that after another 10 minutes of activity, the resources that someone might need have been released for the next person. And so to clarify further, so we said an explorer has a medium workload, a creator is very active, and a viewer is lighter. Well, we have these factors that we can use if we want to create a total count of this number of viewers, this number of explorers, and so many creators. We can use these factors to extrapolate that. And then there's another rule or two. Yeah, there's two other rules about how you're gonna set up your nodes in a cluster, because you can have more than one virtual machine for your Tableau Server environment. In fact, if you have a larger environment, you're gonna start adding more VMs in that same cluster. And there's two guidelines there, which are for clusters with less than a total of 40 cores to use 8 core nodes, and to use 16 core nodes for larger ones than that. Again, this is probably like, this is still a while out if you're just getting started, but they're in general the rules that we use to design the way that that cluster will look like. But the three first are the most interesting, I guess. And there's just like one final side rule, which is the fact that you'll assign 8 gigabytes of memory per core, typically. So if you have a typical 8 core node, which is very often your start, we'll find, you would assign at least 64 gigabytes of memory to that node. And to get into some examples, because this is really abstract,